of my professional experience. I know some of the letters here kind of small, but yes, I am now in my current position as president of Morgan State University, 9.5 years. And before that, as you heard, I was chancellor of the University of Wisconsin Colleges, 13 campuses spread across the state of Wisconsin. In addition, I was also chancellor of the University of Wisconsin Extension, becoming the first person in the history of the state of Wisconsin to head 2 statewide institutions simultaneously. I also oversaw Wisconsin Public Television, Wisconsin Public Radio, all of the online degree programs in the state of Wisconsin, all of the economic development activity. I'm going someplace with this. Before that, I was, in the vernacular, up the street. I was at Auburn for 11 years as the vice president there. When I raised my hand and said yes to Auburn in 1995, I became the first black person in the history of the state of Alabama to ever be appointed to a senior administrative position at a predominantly white institution in the state. And I did that for 11 years. Before that, I had the opportunity for 8 years to be the assistant and associate provost at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. And then before that, I was at Princeton, and I was a program officer and director of the Office of Minority Affairs for the Woodrow Wilson National Fellowship Foundation, worked very closely with the former president of Princeton University, Bob Coheen, and the former president of Hamilton College, Richard Cooper, and the former president of the New York Public Library. So this is just a snapshot, a brief snapshot of my professional experience. And as you heard from Dr. Troy, that's my formal education. Those 2 degrees mean everything to me. The first one's up there, the BS degree in political science from this historic special place in 1977, Dr. Troy, yes. And then my mom was critically ill, and I knew that she didn't have much time left, and so I did not want to go far. And I decided, when I had a conversation with Dr. Fannie Cooley, that I needed to, if you will, stay my behind right here. And oh, I'm so happy that I did. And so I stayed on here for 2 more years and got a master's in student personnel administration, was mentored by Dr. Cooley. For those of you who know her, know her legacy. And then I went on to Harvard, got another master's, and then stayed on at Harvard and received my doctorate. However, if you will, who am I beyond these credentials? I'm a turtle on a stone.
Thank you.
Now, I wish I could own that phrase, but I can't. I actually borrowed this phrase from the late Willie Strain, who was my former colleague at Auburn. And Mr. Strain came over to my office one day, and we were in deep conversation, and he said, well, you know what, Dr. Wilson? He said, you are just like me. And I said, well, Mr. Strain, how is that? Because you know, Mr. Strain is legendary. For those of you who don't, you should Google him, Willie Strain. He brought a suit against Auburn University called Strain versus Philpott, because Auburn would not do the right thing and hire black people and promote black people. And he said, I'm just a turtle on a stump. And I said, well, what in the world are you talking about? He said, well, look, if you walk through the woods and you see a turtle on a stump, you can rest assured that he or she did not get there by themselves. Someone lifted that turtle up and put the turtle on a stump. That is really who I am. In terms of my background in early influences, I go here because we're talking about transformational leadership, but people often ask me, how do you describe your leadership? what type of leader are you? And here's the way I respond. I am authentic. I am an authentic leader. And you can, if you will, polish that any way you want. But this is what makes me authentic. Every place I have been, I take all of me there. And if you have a problem with all of me, that's your problem, it's not mine. So, I am the son of sharecroppers. My mom and dad raised cotton in Marengo County, Alabama. And the state of Alabama did not have laws that said that black children must go to school. And so consequently, my dad would not allow the first 5 of his children to go to school. My first 5 brothers. To this day, the 3 that are living are illiterate. The next 5 of us said, we really do want to taste the magic of education. And so you gotta figure out a way to send us to school. And so he said, okay, here's what I'll do. I will send you to school 3 days, 1 week, and you have to give me 2 in the fields. And then I'll reverse it the next week, and you have to give me 3 in the fields. And so I was in the 7th grade before I attended school 5 consecutive days. And I often have to reflect on that time and figure out, well, how did you develop an insatiable appetite for knowledge and education, missing all of that time? And so we grew up in a shanty in Marengo County, early years, what they call a shotgun house, with no electricity, no plumbing, a big potbelly stove there in order to keep us warm. This little shanty had so many holes in the wall. People often joke and say, well, you grew up in a holy place. I said, yeah, but not the kind of holy place that you're talking about. Yeah, it was spiritual, and my mom was quite religious, but we had some serious holes in those walls. And the whites who owned the property that we were sharecropping for would bring down to the shanty Look and Life magazines. And they brought them down not for us to read, but they knew my mom was very creative and she would figure out a way to take the pages of those Look and Life magazines, make a homemade starch, and our responsibility was to plaster these pages of Look and Life magazines on the walls of that shanty to keep the cold wind out in the winter. And on those days when I would get home from having a cotton sack across my shoulder, I would grab a kerosene lamp and I would read the pages of Look and Life magazine. And I would go all over the world without ever leaving the confines of that little shanty. And so, when I was in the 6th grade, my 6th grade teacher was the late Mrs. Lavinia Abernathy Coates, the sister of Ralph David Abernathy. And she said, David, can you come up to my desk at the end of the day? I want to tell you something. And so I did, and she said, look, I want you to go home, and I want you to deliver this message to your father. She said, I want you to tell your father that if he could ever figure out a way for you to come to school 5 days a week, you can go to college. I had never heard anyone utter the word college before. So I went home and I said to my father, Mrs. Abernathy Coates said, if you could figure out a way to send me to school 5 days, I can go to college. You know what my father said? He said, boy, let me tell you something. He said, college is for white people. And we never talked about it then. And then all of a sudden, I found myself in the 9th grade. And my 9th grade teacher at Marengo County Training School, was the late Mr. H.L. Charlotte, a proud Tuskegee graduate. And he came up to me and said, young man, he said, look, I want to take you and Charles Baldwin and Walter Terrell and Roland Taylor next weekend to a special place. So I want to take you to Tuskegee. And I want to take you to this conference because I was in the FFA, Future Farmers of America, and Tuskegee was holding these annual farmers conferences. And so he said, I'll be by your house after school and get the permission from your parents. They did, and I mean, Mr. Charlotte was just golden up there. So he said, yep. So we all packed in his truck, and we arrived here. And as we got off the interstate, and Mr. Charlotte began to point to all of the land and these fences with these kind of aluminum things on top of the post. Okay, you see all that? That is Tuskegee. Really, Tuskegee, well, it's a huge place, isn't it? And then as we got closer, he drove us through Green Fork. And I've never, ever seen black people live like that before. I'd never seen houses like that before. I'd never seen lawns like that before. Oh, and then he said, and let me take you down the street. I mean, what? I mean, it can't get any better than this. And then he drove us down Bill Street and began to point out, this is where Mr. Dawson lives. This is where X lives and Y lives. And I mean, my eyes were about as big as the truck. And then we came on this campus, and then he gave us the lecture of the statue. And then they housed us in the Emirates. And I left this place determined that I was going to make my way back to Tuskegee. That was my first visit in the 9th grade. And so then I went back to Marengo County Training School, and I just prepared. And so I applied. And Tuskegee, for I don't know what reason, accepted me. Because trust me, they did not accept me based on my SAT scores. Let me go on record. They were low. They were low. I got some strong letters from my high school teachers. So now it's August 26, 1973. I will never, ever, ever forget this moment. I got up at about 5 o'clock in the morning to get ready. It was a Sunday morning. To come to this place. We did not have a car. And so I had to get a ride here with the parents of one of my high school classmates, Lucy Taylor, who also was coming. And as I put my little things in a bag and made my way into our front room, I heard someone get up in the back room. And it was my father. And he made his way into the front room. And he had on these overalls. One strap was attached, the other was loose across his shoulder. And he said, David, he said, son, he said, you are about to do something that no one in this family has ever done. He said, you're about to go to college. He said, you're about to go to Tuskegee. And he said, 5 years ago, you told me you wanted to go to college. And do you recall what I said to you? And I said, well, sure, Daddy, I recall. Because it was so hurtful. He said, well, let me tell you what I was really thinking. He said, what I was really thinking was, how in the hell am I ever going to pay for you to go to college? He said, I've been saving for this day. He said, I've been saving for the day when I would see my little David go out that door to college. And so he reached in those overalls and he pulled out something that he called a piece of money. He said, hold out your hand. I held out my hand and he put this piece of money in my hand. And he put his hand over mine. And I looked in his face and the tears were coming down his chin. It was the first and only time that I'd ever seen my father cry. And he said, this is my investment in you. Use it wisely. And I said, yes, Daddy, I would. I went on the front porch as the pickup truck was waiting for me. Opened my hand as the sun was coming up. And there in my hand was a crisp $5 bill. That was all that he had been able to save for 5 years to send me to college. The $5 sent off. And so, in my life and in my career, I have been blessed to have received so many awards, so many recognitions, boxes of them everywhere. But if you walk into my office at Morgan, this shelf is the most important shelf of my life. I put it there every day as a constant reminder that I'm a turtle on a stalk. On this shelf, I should say, this is a sample bale of cotton. Miniature sample bale of cotton. To remind me that these hands picked it. This is a jar of dirt from the shanty that gave rise to me in Marengo County. To remind me that, I'm grounded. And someone planted some seeds in that soil, and they produced fruit. and I have to honor that past. Here is my late father, who is there every day making sure that I do the right thing and that I give him a return on that investment. And here are two $5 bills to remind me of the investment made in me. And finally, this is a key to the city of Selma, Alabama. It was given to me in 1995 when I came back to Alabama by the late Mayor Joe Smitherman, who was the mayor who actually tried to prevent the marches from going across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And when I raised my hand to Auburn in 1995, interestingly enough, it made the national news, and many of the papers in Alabama had a headline that said the following: "Black man gets job at Auburn." The city of Selma decided that it was going to give me a welcome home reception. And it was Joe Smitherman who gave me the key to the city in a place that was so unwelcoming. And so this, if you will, is who I am as a transformative, authentic leader. And I can't ever be divorced from that. Because if I'm divorced from that, if you're divorced from who you really are as leaders and aspiring leaders, you simply are a feather that is blowing in the wind. And when the wind picks up, it lands the feather over here. It picks up again, it lands it over here, and you are never ever grounded because you have divorced yourself from that which anchors you. And so, here's what I learned here. Here's what Tuskegee taught me. And it taught me a lot, and I'll get through this real quickly, through people. And it taught me a lot, President McNair, through incidental learning. As you know about that. Just about walking the campus itself and taking in all of the history of this place. Well, let me start with knowing your history. And the late Frank Tolan from Newberry, South Carolina. See, you never let us forget that, right, Dr. Tolan? And here's what I just adore about Dr. Did not have his doctorate, but he was the absolute most brilliant professor I have had. And so he never ever came to class with a book. He knew the world from all angles, right? And he delivered these lectures in a way that was so fascinating. It just drew you in. You were on the edge of the seat. It was just amazing, right? And everybody on campus always knew what his midterm was and what his final. He didn't care, right? Everybody knew. Here's what Dr. told him. Professor Tolan was going to ask him in his midterm, and here's what he's going to ask him in the final. You know what the midterm question was in African American history? Trace the development of African American history from 1865 to 19 whatever, to where we had come up to in terms of midterm. That was his question every single year. Every year. And we're sitting there writing 5, 6 blue books, right? Because no ABDC stuff. I mean, either you knew it and you could express it, or you did not. It didn't matter that everybody knew what the questions were. And then on the final, it was, well, trace the development. I'm sorry, the first one was trace the development of African American history from 1619 to 1865. And then the second was trace the development of African American history from 1865 to the present. That was it. And I want to credit him always for really instilling in us our history. And it was not just learning some facts. It was knowing it. So, Mr. Tolan taught me to know my history. Then the late Miss Celia Jefferson was at the time a secretary in the offices of the late Dr. Paul Wall in behavioral science research. And here I am showing up with, what, $5, hungry, no money, and Miss Jefferson, you know, she saw that, and she said, David, hey, look, why don't you come over my house and cut the grass next Saturday? And I went, okay. And so I went over, and the grass did not need cutting. And she said, that's the lawnmower, so I got out and ran over the grass. So I came back, and she paid me something like $40, right? But then she had prepared all these meals. I mean, fried chicken and collard green, everything. And I sat there and I just gorged myself. And then she gave me these kind of care packages to bring back on campus. She, if you will, nurtured me in a way that I absolutely needed in order to get through Tuskegee Institute at the time. And so I appreciate that. Mrs. Fuller was the director of the counseling center. And so growing up the way that I grew up, I would not be authentic if I didn't tell you that I had scars. I was angry. And I was trying to process, why was this society trying to limit my growth and limit my intellectual capacity? And here I am struggling, trying to get through Tuskegee and trying to really grapple with these issues. It was Mrs. Fuller who helped me to deal with all of that and put me in a good place emotionally. I got that from Tuskegee. And then, Mr. Fluker. Legendary, I mean, he thought nothing about embarrassing you. And so, he would come to the class, and his question always was, why are you here? And so, of course, we're going to go, we're here to take your class. Oh, come on, brother, why are you here? So I said, well, you know, my trial schedule says, you know, world history, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Mondays and all, like, you know, I'm here to take it. He said, oh, brother, come on. And so he did a fist like this and put it in front of me and said, now look, you're on 60 Minutes, and Mike Wallace is asking you, why are you here? And so I said, oh my God, he jumped on top of that. He said, brother, you're on 60 Minutes. You got 200 million people in America watching you, and all you can say is, I'm like, oh my God. And so at that point, I got what he was saying. And I had to figure out what really is my purpose. And I thank him for helping me figure that out. Because if you don't know what your purpose is, it's very difficult to be a transformational leader. Very difficult to be an authentic leader if you don't know purpose. And then I'm going to end with this one in terms of the people. Miss Evelyn Pack. And so Miss Evelyn Pack was in the English department here. And she was tough, legendary, that it was extremely difficult to get through Mrs. Pack's class. So she taught Composition 201. And she was legendary here for not showing up to class on time, too. And so we had this kind of standing policy, not policy, but a practice, that if professors didn't show up by, 15, 20 minutes, the students can leave. So on the first day of class, of course, we didn't want to be in Mrs. Pack's class in the first place, and so she is 15, 20 minutes late, and so we all get up and leave. So Wednesday, we walk in, Huntington Hall 212, and she is there sitting behind the desk, and she says, "Oh my God, we have such bright students here at Tuskegee." And she said, "Now, let me tell you one thing. I don't care what the practice is here. If I don't come until 5 minutes left in this class, I expect to see all of you in the seats," right? And she said, "Now, because you're so smart, take out your tablets and write this essay." And she said, and here's the topic: what is progress? Right? So here I am, smart, sitting here in Huntington Hall on this summery day. And so I looked out the window and I saw all of my friends, kind of meandering on the yard. And so I started my essay like this. I said, well, Tuskegee has a practice where the professor is 15 minutes late, the students can leave. Mrs. Pack did not show up for her first class within those 15 minutes, and so we left. And then she showed up on time for the second class, and I don't think she was happy that we left the first time. And so now she is giving us this assignment about what is progress, and I'm sitting here looking out the window of Huntington Hall, and I'm seeing all of my friends on the yard having fun, and I'm wanting to be out there with them, blah, 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 blah. And so my last sentence was, now I have finished this essay. This is what I call progress. So now it's Friday, the third day of class, and so Ms. Pack is there on time, we're there on time, so she comes in with all of these 2-page essays. And then she says, oh boy, I thought we had some smart students. She said, you guys are smarter than I thought. And so she started calling their name. I call your name, come up and get your paper. And so she called everybody's name. And then she has this one paper left. And I know now that that's my paper. So now I am just glowing. It's like, oh my God, this is great. Mrs. Pack is about to hold my paper up as the best paper. And so she said, oh, well, we got one person in this class. Oh, this person is so smart. But now I want to just jump up and say, yeah, that's me, that's me. So she read the paper. And then she got to the final sentence. Now I have finished this essay. This is what I call progress. And she said, now, David Wilson, you come up here and get this, because this is what I call bullshit. I had never, ever been so called out, so embarrassed. Excuse me? She said, oh, you got gerunds going everywhere. You got to run on this. You got no theme. You got no. I left her class, and I couldn't get to the Frizzell Library fast enough. I went over and I checked out in the 11th grade English grammar and composition, how to do topic sentences, how to write, So when I got to Harvard, and I was writing for Harvard, the professors there, they give you whatever, if they said write 4 pages, and you wrote 4 pages, they want to give you 5 pages, literally, in notes back. But almost all of them would say, you write well. And I would go to the them and say, yes, that was the Tuskegee in me. So that's what I learned here. I learned the importance of communication and to expressing yourself well. Moving right along. Why did I choose to be a university president? Well, this is simple. I was telling President McNair about this earlier. I was in the SGA when I was here. Charles Howell was the SGA president, and he had me as his Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. And I was thinking, well, this is a big title, right? Of course. I'm thinking Washington, D.C., Secretary of Education. And so at the time, we just thought the food in Tompkins Hall was just absolutely deplorable, right? I would later learn that it's deplorable everywhere. And so the students were complaining. We had the pigeons in the roof. I don't know, I say this to my students all the time, boy, you guys just really don't understand what really sometimes enables you to build character. I'm not saying that this did that, but we would go to Tompkins Hall sometimes and you're sitting there, sitting there eating, and you may get a pigeon drop on the table, right? And so we just got kind of disgusted about that. So I said, you know what? We're not going to eat in there anymore. And we are going to close this place down. And so I led a campus-wide walkout of Tompkins Hall. And it worked so well that only a trickle number of students were going in to eat, and the university was losing money. And so former President Roosevelt Fox said, well, who's responsible for this? And they said, well, it's that Secretary of HEW guy, right? And so he said, well, call the SGA office and have him come out of our office. And so here I am, if you can picture this, so I have this big afro. And now I'm dashiki back, right? And so I marched down to Kresge Center. Today was the second time, by the way, that I've been in the president's office. And so I walked into his office, and he said, Mr. Wilson, I hear that you are the one that is behind this boycott of the campus. I said, well, of course I am. And he said, well, what seems to be the issues? And so I outlined all the issues, and so he said, well, I'll tell you what. He said, why don't we have a more thoughtful conversation about this? He said, let me get up. He said, come around here and sit in my seat. And let me come around and sit in your seat. And here's the conversation I want us to have. I want you to be the president, and I'll be the student. So, I think I like this. And so we had an amazing conversation. That was a challenge for me, because what I didn't realize that I was doing was that I was solving the problem that I brought to him to solve, right? And so we finished that conversation, and he said, now look, here's what I want you to do. Go back, write me 2 pages, and outline those things that you just indicated will solve this problem, and then come back tomorrow. And he said, now, these 2 pages must be only 2 pages, and everything must be correct. And I went down the next day. By the way, those were the hardest 2 pages to write. And I went down the next day and I handed him those 2 pages. And he first of all read it to make sure that everything was grammatically correct. And then he read it again for substance. And then he said, okay, number 1, yes. Number 2, yes. Number 3, no. And here's the reason why. Number 4, yes. Number 5, no. And I was just so impressed with that model of leadership. And at the time, I thought I wanted to go to law school. And I said, you know, I really think I want to be a university president. Because I like that. I like that student-centeredness and that ability to listen. And so here's what I learned from him, was how to be student-centered, as President McNair indicated, integrity in these jobs, whatever job you have, wherever you are. You can never, ever, ever vacate integrity, because once you vacate integrity, everything else does not matter. And I learned that from former President Foster. And then the importance of listening, which is very, very different, if you will, from hearing. He listened to me. He listened to the students. And I learned that, and I have practiced that every place I have been. And the last was humility. There's no place in a David Wilson leadership model for arrogance. Zero place. And if you embrace humility, if you embrace listening, if you embrace caring, if you embrace excellence, you are embracing transformative leadership. And so, what I owe to Tuskegee, I owe it for taking this kid with less than stellar SAT scores and giving him a chance to prove himself. I owe it for adopting me as his son. I never had to figure out here whether I was in the right place. I never felt tolerated. I felt like this was my family, and it had truly adopted me. I owe it for demonstrating every single day a model of excellence and making sure that I understood that that was the Tuskegee way. Excellence in everything. And I have embraced that as a goal, as a standard bearer of leadership. And I owe it for those professors and others I have not named, who cared so much about us that they were going to make sure that we did not see our way through the institution, A, B, C, that we were going to be prepared for what was around the corner, and then for showing me what thoughtful leadership looked like. I owe that to this place. And so, I get an opportunity to speak to a number of aspiring university presidents and chancellors. I was just at Rutgers in New Brunswick, actually 2 weeks ago, speaking to a group of 15 people that have been identified through their Center for Minority Serving Institutions who want to be college presidents and chancellors. And then every year now, for the last 6 years, Harvard has invited me back to speak to about 100 provosts and vice presidents and vice chancellors from all over the world who want to lead institutions. And I had to kind of distill, if you will, about 8 to 10 things that I think, if you are going to be in this leadership model that I'm talking about, you will be well served by embracing. The first is, there's some lessons I've learned along the way. It's very important to have a shared vision, to create a shared vision. Because a shared vision will outlast whomever is in the seat. And so the students have to be a part of that, the faculty have to be a part of it. This is all in the context of higher ed. Alumni, elected officials, everyone. And when you get that, you get institutional dynamics in a positive way. This piece is very important. And I'd like to say that if you look at institutions that are in stronger places, and you look at the way the institutions have treated its leadership, it says a lot. So typically, my theory is that in terms of presidential transitions, that has to be done right. And so I want to applaud President McNair. So well regarded nationally, been here a year and a half, is really, really doing some incredible things to get this piece back on track. When you take this mantle, your responsibility is to run faster than the person who had it before you. Run with more agility. Run with a shared vision. And then when it is time for you to pass the baton, it's like a relay race. You got to make sure that that baton is passed smoothly to the next person. And then the person who is finishing the race has no more responsibility for running, but now for cheering. That the next person will run the race even faster than the previous person. And that is really what is important in this vision. The next is you got to understand politics. I say to people, you got to understand elected politics, and the chaplain was kind of getting at that a little bit in terms of the state of the world. You got to understand elected politics. You got to understand elected politics all the way from the city council, to the mayor, to the state legislature, to Capitol Hill, to county governments, whether you're public or private. That's elected politics. And I often say you have to be on a first name basis with many of these people. But then, more importantly, is what I call the small p. Whether you are in the SGA, whether you're in the English department, whether you're in administration, the small p is institutional politics. It's the water cooler politics. It's that piece when, the meeting is over, and then the 3 or 4 more people have another meeting, if you will, to try to undermine what you did in the big meeting. So you got to understand that. Otherwise, you're not going to be transformational in anything. Then, the budget. Boy, you got to open up and you got to be transparent about the budget. And so people have to know what you don't have. And so every single year at Morgan, Wisconsin the same way, you're going to get about $25 million in these, and they expect us to be God. And so if we don't open up that process and say, well, I only have $1.5 million to allocate, and here are $25 million in needs. You help me decide what the priorities are, right? And then you own that. And that piece is very, very important, because the lack of that transparency, people will always think, what? All I need to do is to yell a bit louder and scream a bit louder, and the money is going to come to my department over Wagner. So that piece I learned is extremely important. Next, hire competent people and then get out of the way and let them lead. But they gotta lead. They gotta have the skills. They have to be committed to the mission of the place. And so, if you're gonna let them lead, they gotta lead. And they gotta own that which they are leading. And they have to really want that thing to be better than anything else within the organization or at the institution. And every institution or organization is different. So sometimes we in higher ed, we move around a little bit. But what we did at institution A, you can't just go to institution B and overlay that. And so I had a great tenure at Auburn, but I got to Wisconsin and that's totally different. And so I could take some concepts that I learned in the place and they went with me, but I just could not take my experience at Auburn and overlay that on the University of Wisconsin. And so we have to be careful about that as you move from one place to another, not just try and do in the next place exactly what you did in the previous place, a recipe for disaster. And this piece is absolutely critical. Communicate, communicate, communicate. And I had a colleague to say to me, David, because I was a little frustrated, and look, I sent out a memo on that last week. What do you mean you don't know the information? Go back and check your email. And okay, how can we say this to you? You have to communicate the same thing at least 39 times. And you know you're ready to move to the next thing when you open your mouth about that thing and people can complete your sentences. Then you know they got it. Then it's time to move on. But communicate, communicate, over-communicate. Let people say, oh, I can't believe that I'm getting another email about blah, 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 right? That's a good thing that I learned. Ignore shared governance at your peril. And within a university context, that is faculty, students, alumni, elected, it is all of that. And it doesn't mean you have to make decisions based on what one group wants you to do. But just listen. And then if you don't make the decision that way, do what? Communicate back to them as to why you're not making the decision the way in which they wanted you to do it. Embrace innovation. And this is extremely important for what I call historic institutions. Because there's a tendency to not move too much from the past. And institutions can't live in the past. You have to reflect on the past. You have to get from the past that which will make you stronger in the future. But you can't live in the past. And when you start living in the past, you are living closer and closer towards 6 feet. Right? So you got to embrace innovation. And innovation is, how do we do this better? We do it better. And I often say that this is changing so rapidly. So I had at Morgan 2 years ago, Tom Friedman. The world is flat, and thank you for coming late. I think that's the title of his latest book. And I never heard this in such simple, elemental terms. And he said, you have to look at the world now as pre-2007, I think it was, and post-2007. So really? The whole world changed in 2007. And so in 2007, Facebook, Google, all those, Twitter, all those things came online in 2007. And consequently, everything changed. And now it is kind of doubling every other year or so. And so the way I have to look at this as a leader is, with all due respect to Harvard, and I say that because it was the institution that was supposed to give me these theories and all of that as to how to do higher ed. I have to unlearn about 60% of all that stuff that I learned in 1988. Because it's no longer relevant for how to lead in this innovation space, right? And I gotta own that. I gotta say, thank you, but I really got to erase this, and I have to embrace something now about the future. And that is so critically important. And so, the last piece here is to love. If I can get to this. Okay. You gotta love and support your students. Because the institution does not exist without them. And kind of have a relationship there of trust and respect, right? So in a leadership role, we're not going to be friends, so to speak, with students, but you got to love them, and I use that term purposefully. And in my case, I try and create this space with my students where I say, no, I will work with you so long as you never put me in a position to embarrass the institution or to embarrass myself. And so with that in mind, let me close with this little video that I participated with them on, just to kind of demonstrate that we do things in a respectful way and then have a little fun in the process. And let's see if this can play out a little volume.
We want to address hands in the air, we are the bears, and we don't say no mess. Hey, what up, K-Dot? You have us all impressed? Morgan State, we graduate, make no mistake that we gon' be alright. 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 Yeah, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. And when we wake up, we're hoping that you say yes for commencement. Our students love this song, Zero Dime. Oh my God, we go hard for our education. You making history for TDE, Morgan State, that's Black history. Come to MSU, so we must be APC. You look at the victory and the fakers, they trying me. Haters gon' hate, no mystery. Hey, Morgan ain't the best, you kidding me. Oh yeah, we one big family.
All my brothers and my sisters can stand with me. Everybody be the best that we plan to be. Come to Morgan State, yes, it's a fantasy. Tell me who else got this kind of energy.
Hey, Morgan State, we wanna address hands in the air, we are the bears, and we don't say no mess. Hey, what up, K-Dot? You have us all impressed? Morgan State, we graduate, make no mistake that we gon' be alright. 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 Yeah, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. We gon' be alright.
Okay, so I thank you very much for your time. I congratulate you once again on the inaugural Tuskegee Washington Leadership Institute. And before I'm more than happy to accept a few questions, if you offer.